Thanks for stopping by, guys, and welcome back to Vintage Story for the third in the series of summaries we've been doing on our streams. Now, I do want to apologize in advance for this one, as it seems that last time I streamed I forgot to record, and by the time I realized what had happened, we were already a couple hours in. So, the video you're going to see is from the stream video itself, so if some of the visuals and audio are a bit on the crispy side, I apologize. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the summary. So, we start on day 18 with wolves still sitting on our roof. I clear out an inventory and stock up on spears and blocks to put into a pillar. I brace myself for the battle that's about to commence, and as soon as I step out the door, 3 wolves leap right on top of me. 3, 2, 1... I take off towards the water to try and put some distance between us, and I'm able to pillar up. After a second of collecting myself and healing, the dogs are dealt with, giving us some much needed fat. However, they had a few pups roaming around as well, and I couldn't bring myself to kill them, so I set out a plan to try and capture them. I went to collect a couple of meat from the pigs that the wolves had killed, only to get scared when it turned out they were actually still alive. So, after using what fat I had to craft a couple of oil lamps, I tended to my garden and began building some traps. After setting out a few traps for piglets, I set even more out for the wolves as well. Then began to collect some cattails to craft even more traps. Almost immediately, one of the traps had sprung, and a piglet was inside. I made out a small pig pen to put them in, and went ahead and made one for the wolves as well. After harvesting a couple of crops, I decorated my base a bit. And then this happens. Oh, the sun's already setting. That... Ooh, 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 ooh. Turn into a monkey there. I'm happy. I'm happy. Wait, the other one's triggered. Is this one? Yes! Yes! We got 2 wolves! We got 2 wolves! Oh! We've got puppies! I managed to catch both wolf pups and put them into a pen, and reset the rest of my traps to try and catch the last piglet. With the sun starting to set, I make myself a small meal and turn into bed. As the sun rose on day 19, I check up on our new pups and spend some time checking the traps. I plant a couple carrots. With that done, I finish setting up the side sod of my house, and set out to my last surface copper deposit that I wasn't able to get to before because of the wolves. I spent the day out there mining before returning home to smelt that copper into tools and ingots and grabbing some sleep. On day 20, Chat and I named the pups. The dark wolf was named Nibbles and the lighter wolf was named Waffle. After doing my daily watering, I began to plan for my fruit harvest. I want to make myself a fruit press. So I set out to hunt some fat, killing the pig that had been hanging out around my base and traveling a bit south to find some more pigs as well. With 4 fat in my inventory, I head back to base and remember to add some decorative chimneys to the top of my house. With the meat I've collected, I cook a few sturdy meals and begin to make myself my first chisel. A short trip to collect some sap later, and I manage to make my fruit press. While we're waiting to get quartz for our skylight, I decide to put in some trapdoors to get a little light in from above, and after another night's sleep, we wake up on day 21 to check our traps and discover our second piglet. After letting them out in their new pens, I pick up the rest of my traps and set out for a day of prospecting, hoping to find some copper close by because my last attempt at a mine wasn't so successful. Soon enough, I stumble across some copper, but it doesn't seem to have any surface chunks. Prospecting nearby shows some decent levels of copper, so I head back to base, take care of my crops, and come back ready to dig. After collecting only 3 pieces of ore, I suspect that this may have been an underground vein that somehow was raised to the surface by the side of a mountain, so I decide to start digging down in search of the rest. I run into a slab of olivine, but I manage to uncover the copper. I do some mining until my sanity starts to suffer, and I head back home to craft some crates to carry out all of our cobblestone needs, and then stay up spending the rest of our night smelting copper. Starting out on day 22, I do my daily watering, and while checking up on our now grown pups, Waffles almost managed to jump out of his pen. After the scare, I check up on the piglets and return to prospecting, this time in search for some cassiterite to make tin. I ended up discovering some ruins, and I find myself some twine. Later, I come across some cabbage seeds and a bronze scythe. During my search, I stumble across an almost perfect cave, and as the sun is getting ready to set, I head back to base with my new seeds and collect a couple of my berries. Also noticing that one of my piglets has grown into a sow. With little light left, I smash my berries into juice and head to bed for the night. At the beginning of day 23, I expand the pig pen, and our second pig grows into our second sow. With that done, I continue to cut down my old hut and try to raise the height of the wolf pen. That's when Nibbles manages to escape, and after a quick chase he leaves me be. So I circle around and continue to close up the wolf pen and put a small staircase to try and recapture Nibbles. After getting him to chase me, I make my way up the stairs and begin to jump across the pen, but he manages to hit me along the way, knocking me into the pen and pouncing down on top of me, marking my first death. After a quick run back, I collect my gear and give Nibbles another poke. I manage to make my way on top of their pen and open up one of the sides, slowly guiding both of them back inside. With Nibbles back where he belongs, I finish tearing down my old hut, tear down the stone fence, and begin to build up my berry garden. Before I can finish though, another night passes, so starting on day 24, we get back to building. After harvesting the last of my berries, I squeeze a little bit more juice and start to seal the berries to make wine. I stop for a second to upgrade my storage from baskets to linen bags, and I begin to add a roof to the wolf pen so there won't be another escape attempt. After a considerably quiet day, I settle in for some sleep. Waking up while it's still dark on day 25, I keep busy by remodeling my kitchen while I wait, and once the sun starts to rise, I return to my search for cassiterite. Coming across the basalt biome, I find my first decent reading of cassiterite. I spent my whole day searching, so with the sun setting, I'm forced to flee back home and back to bed. On day 26, we were woken up by a temporal storm starting. After I tucked into my panic closet, we take out a couple of drifters that were left lingering, and I tend to our pigs, putting out some of the crushed berries we had been storing. I decided to try and do some water mining, so I snag my bucket and travel back to the basalt region. In an attempt to find a safer path, I come across an agricultural trader who happens to be selling beeswax. Once we're back to the basalt biome, I begin to water column down and dig. But without a lantern, I'm having a really hard time, so I have to abandon the idea and return to just digging down with stairs. After mining until my pick's about to break, I have to head back empty-handed. However, there's a problem. How I had constructed the wall column keeps me from getting free. I was forced to stare out as well, but was caught by a couple of drifters before I could. So, with very little pick left, no food, starvation settling in, and multiple drifters lingering over my head, I settle in to try and conserve as much strength as I can and wait for the sun to rise. As soon as I can see on day 27, I manage to make the water column work and finally get free. Just in time for me to start starving, I stumble into some berries nearby, and manage to make my way back to base, planting the berry bushes I had picked up, and I begin to build a second gate into my garden, creating a connection between my berries and my farm. which finally sees my first large harvest, after almost all of my rye and spelt are done maturing, and almost all of my flax is finished. With my new flax, I managed to make myself 2 more bags, and begin replacing my pick. After pouring out some more copper, chat comes in to suggest a laddering mining method. So I settle in, put my new grain to good use to make some pies to preserve the bunch of berries that I had been picking, and sift some sand as I plan out my mission. Planning out for day 28, I intend to stay the night in the mines. I snag up my bed and settle out back to the basalt biome. But before I can get there, I get sidetracked by some ruins and manage to grab myself some bony soil and 3 vessels containing some seeds. After I stop by the trader to sell our bronze scythe, I stumble back into our mine. But with the water becoming an obstacle, I decide to abandon it. Instead, I find a new place to start digging down, laddering and checking until we run directly into tin. After cleaning out the vein, I continue to dig down with no success. Instead, I decide to return to the vein I mined and get comfy for the night. When we wake on day 29, I continue to mine and come across our second tin vein. Despite still finding some traces, I decide to leave them for later and head back home to make bronze. Along the way, we come across some surface copper, but leave it be for later now that we have our own mine for it. Knowing that we'll need to smelt when we get home, I decide to snag some peat to put into the fire. And once we are home, I tend to the rest of our berries and collect our final flax harvest. I find a place to put our peat and discover that I don't have enough copper to create bronze. So instead, I settle in to sift some bony soil and search for some candles. Once the sun starts to rise on day 30, I stop sifting with only a single candle, a couple of gears, and some other assorted stuff to show for it. After putting away our junk, I tend to the crops and head to the copper mine, switching out our staircase for a ladder path down. Once I've collected enough copper, I head back to base and begin smelting. But I begin to run out of charcoal, so I begin to bounce between peat and charcoal to try and make it last as long as I can. Being left with only 2 pieces as we begin to pour our bronze anvil, pick, prospecting pick, hammer, and 2 extra ingots. With the sun setting and our bronze cooling, I harvest a couple of carrots, create a to-do list, and set to bed in the Bronze Age.